Brahmachilani and Jayjeet Bhattacharya joins me on the broadcast. Brahmachilani, to you first. Before we come to the specifics in terms of the India-Canada relationship, I want to also now talk big picture in terms of the G7 summit. This is a summit that is taking place in the shadow of conflicts, one of which has escalated dramatically in the last 24 hours. It is taking place in the backdrop of a US president who has chosen to go back, who also had a verbal altercation with the French president, looking like there's a very deep division within the West. What are we really expecting from the G7 summit per se that is going to kickstart in the next couple of hours?
The fact that the summit is unable to agree on a joint statement tells you a lot about the divisions within the G7. The G20, in fact, has replaced the G7 as the premier global economic forum, but the G7 leaders still believe that they can run the world, they can dictate terms to the world, even though the G member states' share of the global GDP has declined markedly. And in fact, as their economic strength declines, the G7 states' global clout also diminishes. This is why, in the West itself, the relevance of the G7 is being questioned. And I think because of the decline of the G7 as an institution, the G7, to stay relevant, needs non-Western countries like India. India is projected to remain the world's fastest growing major economy for the next 10 years, or maybe at least for the next 8 years. So India, as you pointed out earlier, Gauri, has been getting invited to all the G7 summits. And that really underscores India's growing geopolitical standing, its growing geopolitical clout, and the fact that India now, as the world's largest country in terms of population, is a rising power, and you can't have discussions on international issues without India being present.
Indeed. And while, of course, the strategic aspect of the relations is extremely important, so is trade. More so since is it happening in the backdrop of the Trump tariffs, which have actually caused a deep amount of unease in the entire Western world as well. And Mr. Bhattacharya, let me ask this question to you, Jayjeet Bhattacharya, who is in fact the president of the Center for Digital Economy Policy Research. I want to ask you this, that in terms of the kind of trade agendas that you expect G7 to be able to shape, the kind of roadmap you think it is going to put forth, and also the challenge that it faces, the Trump tariffs being one.
There has been a weakening of the global institutions related to trade. We have seen unilateral tariffs being put in by US, which is clearly the largest economy in the world, and simultaneously the weakening of institutional structures such as WTO, where we do not even have an appellate authority as we speak. So if there is a translation by any of the countries, and in this particular case we're talking about US, where do we even take the matter to in WTO? Clearly the number one issue will be trade in the G7 discussions. And along with it, number two is a continuous deterioration in the security outlook of the world. And the latest being the Iran-Israel conflict that has erupted while G7 is going on. So these are the two major issues that the G7 will be looking at. Along with it, I'm not entirely sure whether it will be discussed or not, but there will be an underlying feeling that after the Bretton Woods collapse and the US dollar coming up as the global currency, the faith in US dollar is getting undermined because of the developments that have happened with the US administration and the rest of the world. And therefore, what should be the alternate mechanism of trade be as we move forward in the next 5 to 6 years? So those will be discussions, or at least issues, that will be in people's mind and the leaders' mind as they get into the G7 discussions in Canada.
Mm-hmm. Indeed, and while those discussions start, and trade will be extremely important, Brahmachilani, one cannot not point out the fact that here is a G7 summit without the American president, who also had, as we were speaking, the verbal altercation with his French counterpart. But the fact that Trump has been so dismissive about his Western allies, about the West in general, where does this put, what can we expect in terms of this year's outcome, if at all any?
The West is at a crossroads. It's at a crossroads not just because of Trump. Much before Trump returned to the White House, there were already political tremors rattling across the West, especially political popular discontent and a rightward shift in politics across Europe that we have been seeing. So the West, as we all know, accounts for just 12% of the global population, yet it dominates international institutions and it has a hold on the international financial architecture. Now, what Trump is doing is basically playing the role of a disruptor. He's shaking up the international system. In a way, it's good for India and it's good for the developing world because there is a long due reform of international institutions. And what Trump is doing is administering a shock. The shock therapy could ultimately lead to reform of the global order, because the global order today is an order dominated by the West. The rules have been set by the West, but the West really, in terms of its economic share of the global GDP, should not be playing this kind of role. So in a way, Trump is doing what is not his real intention is. His real intention is not to bring about a more balanced global order. Yet his actions unintentionally are creating the momentum toward revision of existing institutions.